Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Philp, and I'm a director at Portugal Pathways and your host for today's webinar. The webinar is going to be around about 45 minutes long. If you're unable to stay to the end, please don't worry, as we will be recording the webinar, and the webinar will be obviously sent out to your inboxes within the next 24 hours. So obviously with the NHR tax regime now closed to new entrants, NHR tax holders have officially entered a countdown to planning early before their tax status ends. And today you'll be hearing why the earlier that you plan your income and assets for the end of NHR tax status, the better the outcome in terms of future tax burdens. So we encourage you to leave questions, to leave comments, but we need to remind you that obviously everybody's financial circumstances are different. And if some of your questions are specific to those circumstances, they'll need to be covered off in a one-to-one discovery call with one of our expert cross-border partners. And again, links and how to book those discovery calls will appear in the chat and on your screens. So let's meet today's panelists. Firstly, we have Mr. Paul Stannard. So Paul is the chairman and founder at Portugal Pathways and the Portugal Investment Owners Club. Paul has worked with private clients, investors and entrepreneurs looking to establish a low-tax, high-quality lifestyle in Portugal. And alongside Paul, we have Mr. Chris Marsden. Chris is the CEO at Beacon Global Wealth Management. Chris is a cross-border wealth manager supporting affluent families in Portugal, navigating tax and estate planning, and he is an expert in early planning for post-NHR tax status. So welcome, Paul. Welcome, Chris. So let's get started. So obviously, thank you for the panelists for joining us, and thank you to the audience today for joining us. Paul, we know that if NHR tax holders don't plan early during their 10-year NHR tax period, they risk facing Portugal's progressive tax rates of between 28 to 48% once obviously their tax status expires. Every year that obviously they delay potentially impacts them in terms of future tax burden. And you've created a structure that allows them to benefit from low taxes well after NHR tax status ends. Do you sort of have any examples, Paul, of what would happen if you left it and then you didn't create a plan early on in your tax life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliff edge, really, and it's really hard to communicate sometimes because people think 10 years, that's a long way. I'll do that near the end. But actually, unless you start early, you can't allow a structure to be put in place that builds you the steps. So when you get to year 10 or the day one on year 11, that your assets and income are structured in such a way that makes it tax efficient. You know, we did a survey of over 1,000 expats in Portugal, and only 27% had actually made any kind of planning. You know, they do, you know, they could be impacting, you know, and sitting on a cliff edge if they don't, you know, get some advice and get sort of clarity and peace of mind of how to navigate that.
Okay, Paul. And again, I don't know if you've got any examples, Paul, of where people have maybe fallen foul of that. I believe there was a Swiss couple.
It was a Swedish couple.
Okay.
That was in the media last year that ended up with that in year 11, 180,000 tax bill. We see it all the time. Many clients come to us in year 8 or 9 and say, right, okay, I'm ready to plan now. And then they find that they can't create the structure quickly enough. So it takes 2 or 3, 4 years to build up enough of a platform for it not to actually create between 28 and 48% tax. So the earlier you can talk to a cross-border advisor, whether that's through a wealth manager or alongside a tax advisor, the more you can enjoy life in Portugal and have another 10 years of low tax status.
Exactly. Okay. Thank you for that insight, Paul. Chris, perhaps you could sort of share from your experience and knowledge what you would describe as the best approach to sort of planning early for the end of NHR tax status.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for taking the time out to listen to Paul and I. I think you're right, Steve, and Paul's covered a few bits of it there. The best approach is an individual approach. It's making sure that you sit down with people you trust and people that you can build a relationship with, who will understand what it is you're looking for. I think the key to it is to take away the concern and panic that happens. When you've got NHR, everything's fantastic. You're on very, very low tax rates, sometimes 0%, sometimes 10% if it's on pensions. And to replicate that going forward, as Paul mentioned, there is a real cliff edge at the end of 10 years, because potentially you could be moving to rates of in excess of 40%, so kind of up at 48%, and then you add social taxes, so 52% taxation on your dividend income, on any other income, on things that you bring into Portugal. So it's really important that you actually work out how, what you do. I think for me, the key bit is to do it early, because the earlier you do it, the longer you have to plan. I would say years 1 to 5 are probably years 1 to 3 even are the sweet spot. But it doesn't mean that if you've been here 4, 5, 6 years, we can't work with you and do something, because the kind of plans that we put in place and the structures we use, which we will cover in more detail later on, do give you significant benefits after 4 years, and then even more significant benefits after 8 years. I think one thing to remember is, if you're a US connected person, what we talk about a lot for people living in Portugal will not work for the US people. So what we do with them is we build bespoke plans to make sure that they get the best benefit they can from NHR, make sure that they get the best benefits from investing in different currencies, and educating them to kind of recognize that now they're living in Portugal, spending in Portugal, they probably need euro portfolios rather than dollar portfolios. But I think for every single client and every single person sitting on this webinar, what would I say is the most important thing? The most important thing is to find a good wealth manager / tax advisor who you can build a relationship with over a period of time, 2, 3, 4 months, and work with them to put your goals and build your plan, because every one of us is different. But the one thing I can guarantee is, the longer you leave it, the harder it will be. We work with our clients over a period of time to manage their goals, manage their expectations, and to put them into a position where we take away their worry and their concerns. And it's really that's really important.
Lovely. Thank you, Chris. Chris, really just keeping with you for the time being, to give the audience sort of more of an understanding of the planning process, could you maybe talk us through some of the vehicles used to plan early, what they are and how they work, and obviously why they're so beneficial?
I can do, yeah. I mean, some of these investments are, it's kind of one of the mantras that we use as a Portugal regulated advisor, is that we sit down in the Algarve, but we cover the whole of Portugal. And we sit, and one of our big mantras is, once you're in Portugal, you got to start and learn to think Portuguese, act like a Portuguese. What do the Portuguese people use, and what do they do? And the main savings vehicle of choice is what's known as an life assurance structure, which basically gives you better tax rates or reduction on tax for the longer you hold it. As I mentioned, this isn't applicable for everybody, but certainly for the majority of people. As I say, for US nationals, it's slightly different because of the way the US taxes you. You have issues there. But what is really key is you start filling up the insurance bucket, for want of a better analogy, as soon as possible. So if you can start building that asset up, growing it from year 1, year 2, year 3, using the compound interest, using the growth that the assets that we will work together on, it will enable you and give you far more opportunity to plan post NHR.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. Paul, I'm interested to hear about your experience of the impact of delaying your cross-border tax planning as an NHR tax holder.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on NHR myself, and it shocked me really how many people are just enjoying life in Portugal, and like we all are, and it's not something you really want to be doing, sitting down and working out financial plans and structures. But I was talking to a client recently, a very, very wealthy client who was planning originally to come to Dubai, considered Italy, but settled on Portugal. He said he's made more money in Portugal than he made in the 6 other international locations. But it wasn't till year 2 or 3 when he bumped into a wealth manager on a golf course that he realized the consequences of not planning. And it doesn't cost you anything to get that peace of mind, because ultimately you need to understand the jurisdiction and the nature of your income and assets. And as Chris said, everybody's different. But once you sit down, with someone like Chris and a tax advisor that understands both the jurisdictions where you came from and the tax jurisdiction that you're in, very quickly you can start to build a plan and an understanding and get that peace of mind. But I can't emphasize, how important it is to start those conversations early. It's never too late, because even if you're in year 8, 9, there are things you can do, but you are going to pay a penalty for a period of time to catch up, because you have to build a platform, a pot in another way to allow it to realize the tax benefit, which I think Chris will probably be able to talk on in more detail.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing a lot about planning early, aren't we, Chris? So how big a difference is the outcome if you delay the planning that we've all been talking about on this webinar so far? But maybe you could sort of expand that a little bit.
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, we've been getting quite a lot in the chat of people wanting specific examples. So we can go into specifics, and we can go into how it works. But clearly that takes time and gets a bit complicated. But happy to do it. So if you took out an insurance structure, what you take out is an insurance bond. You put in, let's say you put in €500,000. What we then do is we will then manage that money for you alongside some investment managers. You work with wealth managers, investment managers. It's a fully legal structure in Portugal. And the longer you hold it, the better the tax rates are. So from years 1 to 4, you'll pay 28% tax. From years 5 to 8, you'll pay 21.2. And from years 8 onwards, you'll pay 11.2. We've got slides on all this later, so please, don't worry if it's going a bit quick. So really, if you plan for 8 years and you move your assets from wherever they are at the moment into the insurance structure, post NHR, and those tax rates are only on the growth. So post NHR, we can realistically get your tax rates down. So you want to withdraw €100,000 from that structure, you will be paying in the region of 5 to 7% taxation. So for every €100,000 you withdraw, you may pull out about €93,000 in investment. Now that is a very simplified solution on what you're doing, but the broad base of it is what we do. We sit down with you, we work with you, we make sure that what you invest into is the right structure from the right company in the right jurisdiction. But basically what we do is we make sure that you pay as little tax as possible post-NHR. So clearly you can see with a 8-year time horizon, the earlier you plan, the better.
Lovely. Thank you, Chris. Now, Paul, obviously you speak to a lot of people in Portugal with NHR tax status. What's the most common concern that you hear?
Well, in terms of understanding what happens afterwards, really, and understanding the cross-border considerations, between their home country, and also quite often they'll talk about costs, but you also have to balance the costs with the savings, because there aren't too many options available to you in terms of planning for post-NHR. And as Chris said earlier, they have to start early, because you have to build something up in another investment vehicle so that you can then draw down on it at low tax. And when Chris said earlier about 28% and going down to 11%, that's not 11% of your total monies. This is on the upside. So in reality, when you come out the other side in, say, year 11 of NHR, if you've built that up, you actually, can be drawing down from that pot at, as low as 5% tax in terms of the, the growth on that value. So it's just an efficient way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Paul. Just to reiterate, obviously we get a lot of questions in the chat, and obviously if we can't get round to obviously answering all of those questions in the Q&A at the end, someone from our team will reach out to you individually to answer those questions. And just remember, obviously, that everybody's situation is different when it comes to the type of assets and income. So again, if you've got some questions specific to your own situation, just book a no obligation consultation call, and again, one of our experts can obviously answer those questions and potentially outline a solution for you. So I said it's no obligation, and again, just sort of get in contact with us and we can help you with that. So Paul, let's just sort of segue for a moment and talk about Portugal's economic outlook. What's the sort of general sentiment from international investors in Portugal right now? Are people sort of optimistic about Portugal's future?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're on talking about tax, but, we all want growth, and we're seeing a lot of changes geopolitically, and, the world's getting stranger and stranger by the day. And Portugal seems to be getting safer and safer and more stable, and 15 years ago, that might have been hard to say after the financial crisis. But Ernst & Young, the international firm and advisory firm, recently wrote a report on Portugal, and investor confidence in Portugal is at an all-time high, much higher than some of the major developed nations of France, Germany, and the UK. And the European Union is forecasting for Portugal to outperform the Eurozone in terms of GDP growth, and inflation is declining faster than the rest of Europe. And this also applies to Canada. And the other thing is we're seeing a lot of investment where the dollar, everybody felt safe in the dollar, but we're now seeing the last 2 quarters private equity in Europe, and therefore Portugal as well, has outperformed US markets. And there are certain sectors in Portugal that are really outperforming the markets, hospitality and luxury tourism. Obviously, the property market there's more demand than supply because of a lot of talent and wealth coming to the country. Media and international events. Portugal is the 3rd most popular place in the world now to hold an international event. In fact, the biggest investment summit in the entire world is being held in October with 2,500 delegates coming to Portugal to discuss international tax and investment opportunities for some of the wealthiest families and private wealth. For the first time in 50 years coming to Portugal, you had the biggest tech summit in Portugal. And Portugal also has one of the best public and private healthcare infrastructure of any international nation. Now, it's not perfect, like there is any kind of perfect healthcare system, but all of those sectors are outperforming the market, and there are a lot of investment coming in internationally, backing Portugal at the moment.
Lovely. Thank you, Paul, for that insight. Chris, I know there's obviously been a lot of international political change over the last year. So how does this sort of impact people from, say, the UK or US, for instance? And I know you've got a couple of slides here that can illustrate and help you answer some of this. So let me give you.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of chat, a lot of talk in the chat about being specific and getting them more, into some more detail. So okay, let's get into a bit more detail. Political change. What we've seen. Well, for all our UK friends on the call, we've seen a Labour government that's come in that has significantly changed the goalposts on inheritance tax. For everybody that's living outside of the UK, it's absolutely fantastic news. It means that you now have the ability to fall outside of the UK inheritance tax net. And what does that really mean for you? Well, if we look at this one here, where we've got Edward, 60 years old, widowed. He's no longer a long-term UK resident. He's lived in Portugal, but where are his assets? Well, he's got a £1 million house in the UK. He's got an ISA for £200,000. He's got other assets, which are pension assets of £500,000. And in Portugal, he's got a £1 million house in Portugal and £500,000 in assets. So he's got a total estate of 3.2 million. So if we go on to the next slide, what are the options? Well, before the Labour government changed the ideas in the UK, his IHT liability, we'd have had no option to get rid of that. It would have been just well over £1 million. If he had been outside the UK for 10 years post and currently sitting where we are, that means his Portugal assets would fall outside of his estate. So then he would reduce just by living in Portugal for the 10 years, he'd have reduced his tax down to 280,000. What we would work with him on is to sell up his UK property, liberate his UK pensions by moving them out probably into the insurance structure while he's under NHR. So that's a really good way of moving pension assets into the insurance bonds, so that we build up at low taxation. We build up something that can then be taken out at lower taxation. So then all of a sudden he's got no UK assets, so he has no UK inheritance tax liability. So that's one example of how political change and how governments have unintended consequences. I think the changes going on in America, I mean, that's a big area, and it's something that we should really talk to people in much more detail on. But if any NHR tax holder is serious and they're going to be outside of the UK for 10 years or more, you should not be holding any UK assets. And please reach out to an advisor to talk to you about this. And they include pension assets, they include investment assets, they include ISAs, that includes housing, because at some point you will lose 40% of those on your death, and we can make sure that you can keep the value of them but not lose the asset. Other political changes, well, with what's going on in the Middle East currently, we are seeing more people coming to Portugal from the US. So US people are coming over here, and we're working with them to structure their portfolios so they're Euro compliant and they're European compliant and American compliant. It's really, really vital that American people sit down and look at how they hold their funds, because what might work in America may not work in Portugal, and probably what works in Portugal will not work in America. So, please be aware of what the options are there. I think the other area of political uncertainty and the issues that causes are that for people for people moving out of politically uncertain areas. You know, there was talk of lots of people moving to Dubai and places like that because of the low taxation. I think countries like Portugal with their golden visa scheme and NHR 2.0 will see people coming back to Europe and going that way.
Thank you, Chris. I mean, I've got another slide here, Chris. I didn't want to talk to that now, but around the insurance wrapper as an example.
Yeah, that's great. Happy to run through that. So we spoke earlier. And people were asking for more detail. So this is more detail on the insurance wrapper. So what are the benefits? So the key benefits are all the time your funds are in the wrapper, anytime you buy or sell an asset, anytime you purchase or do anything, there is no taxation until you take any money out of the insurance bond. Now that's different to holding it in a just in an investment fund or a managing the money yourself where you're day trading or you're moving money. Then you're subject to Portuguese capital gains tax at rates of 28% on every trade, every buy, every sell. If there's a profit made, you'll pay on it. So there's full tax deferral within these insurance bonds, which gives you the facility to manage the money long term and in a much better way. As I say, tax only applies on the withdrawal. So again, what we've been talking about, planning early. If you manage to get this in place in year 2, by year 10 of your NHR, what you will have is a much better opportunity to then bring money out of the insurance bond, the insurance wrapper, at a rate that's much lower. I think the next slide will show us through the reduced taxation that I went through earlier. Yeah, so as you can see there, I need to put my glasses on for this. If you start in year 1 of your NHR, after 8 years, you can see you'll be down at the 11.2% rate at the end of your NHR because you will have had 8 years of investment. And as we mentioned earlier, that is 11.2% on the growth. So in the first parts of your withdrawals, you'll be taking out much more of the original capital you put in. So if you put €500,000 into the structure right in year 2, and it's grown to, it's grown to 1.5 million by the end of year 10, you will still have that full 500,000 to withdraw as well. So typically tax rates we are seeing for our clients currently are in the 4 to 5% range. So you pull out €100,000 to produce your income for the year, and you will effectively have a tax rate of €5,000 on that. If you were doing that via a pension, so your pension assets are paying that out, you would then be at 48% tax. So as you can see, there is significant tax savings to be done there.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. That was really clear. And again, just for everybody on the call, obviously we'll be sharing these slides with you so you can study them in a little bit more detail. And again, if you've got any particular questions or anything that you think that obviously aligns to your personal situation, again, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to arrange, as I said, a no obligation discovery call to talk about your specifics. Just before we move on to the Q&A, I just want to ask Paul, how important would you say it is to have advisors that work collegiately together from a tax and wealth management perspective? As we know, obviously Portugal is not based on sort of Anglo-Saxon law, and so why is it sort of so important to have trusted advisors to work on your behalf, especially around the tax and financial planning?
Yes, Steve, I mean, that's a really good question. And looking at the chat, there's a lot of people. Can you be very specific? Can you talk to me about Americans? Can I put every person when it comes to cross-border tax is different. So even on these webinars, we have to be very guarded that we don't set a hair running in terms of someone taking one piece of advice that might be right for one person and not right for the next person. So we have to be very mindful of what we do. But we find the best solutions are where you have a wealth manager and you have a cross-border tax advisor or advisors. So sometimes, we've got some very specialized US tax advisors on our team of experts, right? but they then work collegiately with the Portuguese tax. And then when it comes to wealth management, you need European regulated people to advise those Americans, because once they have a Portuguese address, the advice they get from wealth managers in America actually isn't valid. I believe that's right, Chris. Isn't
totally
valid.
correct, yep.
Yeah. So what we recommend is have that collegiate approach. And I see there's a lot of people saying, well, can you answer me this? Can you answer that? Well, if we get on with the right advisors and we understand the inner workings of your income and assets and what you want to achieve, then there aren't many things that you can do. The most common one, obviously, is the insurance wrapper, in terms of the post-NHR for most jurisdictions. But when you get to Americans, it is very different. And when they were in America, it was pretty straightforward. But actually, once they get to Portugal and they look at they do need more specialist advice than they would have had when they were, back in the States.
Lovely. Thank you, Paul. Conscious of the time, we've got 10 minutes remaining of this webinar, and I want to get on to a couple of questions from the Q&A before sort of wrapping up. And again, obviously, we're quite clearly not going to get to all of the questions in the allotted time. So again, just to reiterate, we will be getting back to everybody individually and answering those questions and setting up any of those discovery calls for you. So a couple of questions that I'm going to take from the Q&A. We've got one here from Bruce, and I'm going to put this one to you, Chris. What is the timeline for implementing a strategy for tax while still under NHR? How long does it actually take?
That's a great question. I mean, I think to the answer to that question is we can work as quickly or as and as diligently as you want. I mean, obviously we need to have a discovery call with you and work that, but we can work from having our first meeting to getting your assets invested and putting your planning in place and giving you the certainty and the peace of mind within 3 months. So that will probably be us coming to see you 3-4 times, filling in paperwork, making sure that we understand what your goals are, making sure that what we do is work with you to get the right investment managers in place, making sure that everything we understand, we'll get there. Now, the only things that might hold that up are if we need to work with other advisors within your remit. So, sometimes people in the UK, pension companies in the UK, take some time to get back to us. But we will work at speed, and this can be done relatively quickly.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. So, Chris, I'm going to stay with you. A question from Mark. He's in his 6th year of his NHR status, and he's paying currently 10% on his UK pension. A friend told him that he'd set up an insurance bond, but that had to go through a wealth manager who was regulated in Portugal, as he said that he couldn't buy them directly, and it had to be independent advice. Can you sort of explain how that whole sort of scene works?
Yeah, and it's always good to have a friend in a pub who tells you something. It's always one of those areas where it's worth exploring. I think it's like everything. If you're in the UK, you'd use a UK advisor, and I highly recommend that when you're in Portugal, use an advisor that's based in Portugal, works in Portugal, is regulated in Portugal, regulated to conduct business in Portugal. Make sure that make sure that they understand what you're looking for and how you do it. But yes, to set up the insurance bonds and the insurance structures, you do have to use regulated intermediaries in Portugal. We are regulated in Portugal via our compliance people. We often, there was a question in the chat earlier, we often work with people's UK advisors because they will not be regulated in Portugal now. Because of Brexit, their qualifications don't carry over. So we often work with people's advisors who are based in the UK. But again, if you're living in Portugal, and you're working in Portugal or you're retired in Portugal, you know, what do you need to do? You need to think like you're Portuguese. So you probably need to work with people that are used to the Portuguese system. The fact that they've got a pension and they're in year 6. One of the things I picked up on earlier was on the inheritance tax side. You know, we would look at saying, okay, let's see how we can move that pension pot into an insurance bond over a period of time while you're only paying 10% tax. And then what you can do at a later date is move that money out of your insurance bond at rates that are around the 5, 6, 7% tax mark. So you get such a good benefit. I hope that answered the question.
Lovely, thank you, Chris. Just sort of one last question before we sort of wrap up and just take some takeaways from today's webinar. And Paul, I'm going to put this one to you. This is from Lisa. Lisa said she was thinking of getting a golden visa to one of the alternative investment funds, such as a Portugal Future Fund. She's asking how tax efficient are these, as she currently only has a temporary visa and the authorities are getting hot on the 90-day rule. What's the tax upside of these private equity funds in Portugal? As obviously she's heard that they're pretty tax efficient.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting quite a few people that are on the 90 days in every 183 temporary visas in Portugal and choosing to go for a golden visa, so they've got more flexibility and therefore, you know, investing in some of the alternate investment funds that are approved for golden visa. Typically, you know, they're one of the best and most tax efficient ways to invest in Portugal, because there is no tax on upside to foreign investors and only 10% on tax to people that are based in, you know, from Portuguese residents. But obviously you have to look at the cross-border tax considerations as well, but you know, we can work through that. I just noticed a few people are coming back. Hopefully I've answered that question about explaining about they don't quite understand how you get to the 11.2% and then gets to 5%. I mean, ultimately that 11% is the upside. So Chris, I don't know if you want to put a little bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, more than happy. Yeah. So the way the taxation works is the rate is reduced from 28 to 11.2 over the 8 years. So, and then what you do is you work out how much of your withdrawal is capital and how much of your withdrawal is income. So let's just take an example, something very simple and easy for me. If 90% of your withdrawal is capital and 10% of it is income, and this will depend on the growth your portfolio's had, depend on lots of figures. But let's just work it's a 90-10 rule. So you wanted to draw £100,000 out, £90,000 of that is capital. The only part of it that's going to be taxed is the £10,000 because that's capital gain. If that's taxed at 11.2%, that means you'll be paying €1,120 in tax. That's an effective tax rate on that £100,000 withdrawal of 1.12%. So what we're saying is over time, as the gain part of it becomes more and the capital part becomes less, you know, you'll go anywhere between 0 and 11.2. And most of the time what we see is around about the 5 and 6% mark until you exhaust it all. But at the most, all you'll ever pay ongoing for the, if you build this up for 10 years over your NHR and then take it out over the next 20 years, 30 years, you will never pay more than 11.2% tax.
But that was well explained. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So obviously we've gone through a lot of detail, and I keep going back to it. Every individual situation is just that, an individual situation. So we'd be more than happy to get on a quick discovery call with you. Just obviously assess your situation, have a look at some of the specifics, and then obviously look to sort of tailor something aligned to what you require in the short, medium and long term. So please obviously just sort of contact us via the link that's been shared. But before we go, I'd like to ask both Chris and Paul really just to sort of give one clear sort of takeaway, one something that you can sort of hang your hat on from today's webinar. Just to reiterate, this webinar will be is being recorded in its entirety and will be shared with you again. So again, you can look back. All the slides that you've seen today will be included as well within an email, so you can review those. But Paul, start with you. What's your sort of one sort of takeaway for the audience, please?
Well, keep enjoying life in Portugal, but start having those conversations now. There's no cost to having a discovery call with someone and getting a bit of clarity and peace of mind, so you know the direction. You don't have to go with the first people you talk to. You can talk to a couple of suppliers. Portugal Pathways has a trusted network of cross-border tax advisors, wealth managers, and start that journey, because delaying it every year, you are going to cost yourself money, and somewhat significant money if you create any form of delay. It's like throwing money out of the window by not planning.
Thank you, Chris.
I think the takeaway is I totally agree, Paul. You're living in Portugal, enjoy it. Get out there, enjoy the food, enjoy the company, enjoy the people, enjoy the country. The one takeaway really is don't panic, don't worry. There are very, very good people out there who will work with you to make sure that you have a great time in Portugal and continue to. Because if you think about it, if you end up in a place where you're suddenly subject to 50% tax, you've got to earn twice the money to keep your same lifestyle. So it's important. Planning's important. We talk about it. I would say that it's what we do. What we do. But what I always say to my clients and to my friends and everyone that I work with is, we're there to take the stress out of your life. We're the sleeping pill. We put in place the solutions that will help you just relax and enjoy your life, knowing that you're in good hands.
Okay, thank you.
And just to reiterate that, really, the peace of mind of, we all work, a lot of people that will be on this webinar, you can see by how much hair I've got, I've worked hard in my life for every penny I've made. Giving it away through just not planning just does not make sense. We've got everybody coming at us, whether it's, wherever, for more and more tax, indirect and direct taxes. And these are things that you can do something about. It's within your gift to have a couple of calls with some people who are giving up their time to help you. And if you like, the direction of travel that one of these advisors or one or two of these advisors are offering, then you can continue to see the fruits of your labor and make sure that you have a good estate plan to go with it.
Lovely. Thank you.
Couldn't agree more.
So, guys, that's the sort of end of today's webinar. As I said, we'll be sending out a recording, all the slides that you've seen today. If you've obviously put a question in the chat and we haven't got back to you, we'll reach out for you for that. Those that have requested a discovery call, our team will get onto that straight away and organise that for you. It really just leaves me to say, obviously, thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our audience, and thank you to Paul and to Chris. Our next webinar, as you can see on the screen, is on July the 8th at 4 p.m. Lisbon time. And this one is all about tax and estate planning in Portugal. So again, the link has been shared. If you want to join us, please obviously book that webinar and tell your friends. Until then, obviously wishing you a lovely time in Portugal, and if you need anything, please reach out to us. Visit our website www.portugalpathways.io, and we'll be pleased to assist you. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.